If you're watching this, there's a good chance you've spent decades doing exactly what you were told to do. You worked hard. You paid your taxes. You showed up every day even when you didn't feel like it. You saved what you could. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there was always a promise. A simple promise. Work hard long enough, and one day you'll be able to retire and enjoy the life you've earned. But what if that promise is quietly disappearing? What if retirement is no longer a stage of life that everyone can reach, but a luxury that only a shrinking number of people can afford? That's the uncomfortable reality millions of Americans are beginning to face today. For most of modern American history, retirement was considered a reward. After decades of contributing to the economy, people could finally step away from work and focus on family, hobbies, travel, and peace of mind. The system wasn't perfect, but it worked for many people. Pensions were more common. Housing was affordable. Healthcare costs were manageable. A single income could often support an entire household. People felt that if they stayed disciplined and responsible, retirement would eventually take care of itself. Today, that confidence is fading. More Americans are reaching retirement age only to discover that the finish line keeps moving further away. One of the biggest reasons is something that doesn't get enough attention. The cost of living has risen much faster than most people's ability to save. Everything costs more than it used to. Groceries cost more. Insurance costs more. Property taxes cost more. Utilities cost more. Healthcare costs more. Even simple everyday expenses that once seemed insignificant now take a noticeable bite out of household budgets. Many retirees are discovering that the amount of money they thought would last 20 years may only last 10 or 15. That's a frightening realization when you're no longer earning a paycheck. The housing market has become another major challenge. For younger generations, buying a home feels increasingly out of reach. But even for older Americans who already own homes, rising property taxes, maintenance costs, and insurance premiums are creating new financial pressure. Many retirees find themselves living in homes they technically own but can barely afford to maintain. Some are downsizing. Some are moving to different states. Others are returning to work because their housing expenses continue to rise while their retirement income remains relatively fixed. Healthcare may be the single biggest threat to retirement security in America. Most people underestimate how much healthcare can cost later in life. A major medical event can erase years of savings in a surprisingly short period of time. Prescription drugs, specialist visits, long-term care, rehabilitation, and assisted living facilities can become overwhelming financial burdens. People often spend decades planning for retirement but fail to fully account for the possibility that healthcare costs may become one of their largest expenses. The result is that many retirees live with constant financial anxiety, wondering if one unexpected diagnosis could completely change their future. What's especially concerning is that the traditional safety nets people once relied upon are not as strong as they used to be. Many private sector pensions have disappeared. Instead of guaranteed retirement income, workers are often responsible for managing their own retirement accounts. That sounds empowering in theory, but in reality, it shifts enormous responsibility onto individuals. People are expected to make investment decisions, predict future expenses, estimate life expectancy, and manage risk over decades. Even financially responsible people can make mistakes or experience market downturns that significantly affect their retirement plans. The reality is that millions of Americans simply haven't been able to save enough, not because they're irresponsible, not because they wasted money, but because life happened. Wages didn't keep pace with inflation. Children needed support. Medical bills appeared unexpectedly. Jobs were lost. Economic crises disrupted plans. The idea that everyone who struggles financially in retirement simply failed to plan is not only inaccurate, it's unfair. Many hard-working people did everything they were supposed to do and still find themselves facing uncertainty. There is also a demographic shift taking place that receives far less attention than it deserves. People are living longer than previous generations. On the surface, that's wonderful news. Longer lives are something to celebrate, but longer life expectancy also means retirement savings must last much longer. Someone retiring at 65 today may need their savings to support them for 25 or even 30 years. That's a challenge few previous generations faced on the same scale. The longer people live, the more pressure is placed on retirement systems, healthcare systems, and personal savings. At the same time, the labor market itself is changing. More Americans over the age of 65 are working than at any point in recent history. Some choose to continue working because they enjoy it, but many continue working because they need the income. You see it everywhere. Older cashiers, older delivery drivers, older customer service representatives, older workers taking part-time jobs that previous generations might never have expected to need. The image of retirement as endless leisure is increasingly being replaced by a reality where many seniors continue earning income well into their 70s. Technology and automation are creating additional uncertainty. Entire industries are changing rapidly. Skills that were valuable 20 years ago may not be valuable today. Workers approaching retirement age often face unique challenges when industries evolve or jobs disappear. Rebuilding a career at 55 or 60 is very different from doing it at 30. Yet many Americans are finding themselves forced to adapt because they simply cannot afford to stop working. Another issue that rarely gets discussed is loneliness. Financial security and emotional security are deeply connected. Retirement was once associated with strong communities, family support systems, and local social networks. Today, many retirees find themselves isolated. Families are spread across different states. Neighborhoods change. Social connections become harder to maintain. Financial stress combined with social isolation creates challenges that go far beyond money. Retirement isn't only about having enough dollars in the bank. It's also about having a meaningful and sustainable quality of life. When you look at these trends together, a larger picture begins to emerge. Retirement is gradually shifting from something that was once considered normal to something that increasingly resembles a privilege. The people who are most secure in retirement often have multiple sources of income, substantial assets, valuable investments, and access to quality health care. Meanwhile, millions of others are trying to make limited savings stretch across decades of rising costs and economic uncertainty. This isn't meant to be a message of fear. It's meant to be a message of awareness. Understanding reality is always better than ignoring it. The world changes, economies change, financial systems change. The assumptions that worked for previous generations may not work for future generations. Recognizing that fact is the first step toward making better decisions. One of the most important lessons I've learned studying economies over many decades is that small trends often become big trends before most people notice them. Retirement becoming more difficult isn't happening overnight. It's happening gradually, one higher bill at a time, one delayed retirement at a time, one additional year of work at a time. Because the change is gradual, many people fail to recognize how significant it has become. The good news is that awareness creates opportunity. The earlier people understand these realities, the more options they have. Building multiple income streams, reducing unnecessary debt, maintaining financial flexibility, investing consistently, and focusing on long-term planning become increasingly important. In a world where retirement is no longer guaranteed, these aren't exciting solutions. They aren't quick solutions, but historically, disciplined decisions made over long periods of time have produced the best outcomes. Perhaps the biggest shift that needs to happen is psychological. Instead of viewing retirement as a fixed age, People may need to think about it as a financial condition. Retirement isn't about turning 65. Retirement is about reaching a point where your assets can support your desired lifestyle. For some people, that may happen earlier. For others, it may happen later. The number itself matters less than the financial reality behind it. As we move forward, the conversation around retirement needs to become more honest. People deserve realistic expectations. They deserve transparency about the challenges ahead, and they deserve the tools necessary to adapt. Pretending everything is fine doesn't solve problems. Understanding them does. The truth is simple. Retirement is becoming more expensive, more complex, and more difficult to achieve than many people realize. For millions of Americans, what was once considered a normal stage of life is beginning to feel like a luxury reserved for the fortunate few. The question isn't whether this trend exists. The question is whether we're willing to acknowledge it before it affects even more people. Because the sooner we face reality, the better prepared we'll be for whatever comes next.